Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Watchworthy. I'm your co-host, Miss Christy.
And it's your boy, Brother Ash.
And we are back with another documentary from Netflix. This one's titled Scouts Honor: The Secret Files of the Boy Scouts of America. So this is late breaking news, I guess. This just came out in 2023. And the events that we're going to talk about, they've been going on for decades, but you know how it is in America. Like, that's why they call it the Secret Files, because this was all under wraps until now. So this is a 2023 documentary. Warn you right at the top, huge trigger warning. This documentary and this episode will be about essentially a child abuse case. So we definitely want to give you a trigger warning now that this is all about the cover up of child abuse.
And also, if you end up watching the documentary as well, a lot of the victims go into specific detail about some of the altercations. So
yeah,
just a warning before you got. Well, they give them a trigger warning.
Yeah, it definitely was hard for us to stomach. So that's the point of this whole podcast. We watch these documentaries, so you don't have to. We're just gonna give you high level, what they talked about. Well, actually, not too high level. I do want to dig in a little bit. But just a huge trigger warning right at the top that this is about child abuse. And so why did we choose this documentary? Why did we decide to cover this? I think it really just comes down to we want to educate our community. And these people are still out there. Boy Scouts of America is still operating. And, now that this documentary came out, maybe something will happen in the judicial system. But we just wanted to, really educate ourselves and others.
Also, everybody's always kind of dark humor kind of joked about the Boy Scouts. I feel like it's something I like to call a Family Guy joke.
Yeah.
Something that's not funny at all, but it's just something that always people make humor of. So I was curious about the allegations. So that's what brought my attention to it as well.
Yeah, I feel like I have heard whispers about it, but never knew this much detail. So we gonna get into it.
They was dropping names, yo.
Yeah, so we will definitely be sharing those names as well. We are not scared. I'm not scared of no Boy Scouts.
I'll whoop a motherfucking child molester's ass.
Yes.
You best believe I will.
Yeah, I think the thing is, me and Josh, we've come to know each other. Obviously, we've been dating for 4 years. And Josh, I love you, boo-boo. Josh always jokes that I think everybody's a pedophile, but it's a lot of pedophiles in America. So I'm not wrong to think that there's sex offenders who live next door to you, and all you need to do is check the list on Google.
It's true. Yeah, it's true.
And I feel like when you were studying criminology, you just despise crimes that involve kids the most.
Yes, because I've worked with kids since I've been able to work, since I've started working, started in summer camps, did after school programs, worked in education, whatever. And it's just one of those crimes where it's just unforgivable for me.
Yeah.
And child abuse is something that is it affects a lot of people, and it often ends up being people who perpetrate other crimes.
Yeah.
Even completely unrelated to sexual abuse or any type of abuse. To me, it's always been a sensitive topic because I've worked with children who have suffered from it. I know people who have suffered from it, and I've seen what it does to our community. So, yeah, very passionate about that.
Well, as we discuss this documentary, we always got a poll question for y'all. So our question is, who is the bigger villain, the perpetrator or the enabler? Because, you got the bad guy, the people who actually perpetrated the crimes. They're a piece of shit. We all know that. But what about the enablers? I guess I'm biased. I'm giving y'all my answer. I feel like enablers... This wouldn't have been able to go on for decades if there weren't people in high positions of power who let it happen.
Yeah, so it's a lot of blame goes both ways, but on the same token, it's hard to compare an enabler, somebody turning a blind eye, to the person actually doing it every day.
Yeah.
But when you think about, when you're in a position of power and you don't do nothing, it is just as hurtful and just as harmful, and just as sick, in my opinion.
Right.
Both perpetrator and enabler can go to hell up. And gasoline draws.
Well, I want y'all to just keep that in mind as we're talking about this. Who's the bigger villain, perpetrator or enabler? So, Josh, tell us a little bit about the Boy Scouts.
All right, so first things first. The Boy Scouts were founded in England in 1908. They were corrupt from the beginning, and they also had to kick a doctor out of the Boy Scouts even way back then.
Damn, red flag right at the beginning.
Red flag right at the beginning. The first flag being this was something that came from Europe. Now,
just anything that comes from Europe.
Look, I don't got no problem with Europe or European people. I will probably take my beautiful girlfriend to Europe one day for a nice, fancy, romantic vacation or whatever.
I look
That's a
forward to
dream
that.
of mine, of ours. But if we're being honest, in American history, things that came from Europe
Yeah.
to America, especially in this time period of 1908, weren't all most well thought out or most moral ideas.
Right.
So that was a red flag to me. It came
You're
from
like, red flag Europe.
came from the old world. So I don't, I'm gonna just leave that there. It's important to note that the Scouts were based on religion, with a lot of church leaders on the board of directors and Mormon investors. Another red flag. Every documentary we see with Mormons is never.
That's what I was gonna say. No shade to the Mormons, but I just feel like every single documentary I watch, if the Mormon church is involved, it's shady.
They be on weird shit. They be on different type time over there. So I definitely think it's fair for us to red flag that.
And just the mix of church and state. Like, this is supposed to be a boys' youth group. Like, why is the church involved? Like, I don't know.
That's wasn't really giving the good vibes.
No.
As soon as I seen the word Mormon. Journalist Patrick Boyle is one of the people who has always had a feeling that the Scouts were fucked up. I love a good journalist. I love a good whistleblower.
Yes.
Saw the first lawsuit of a scout leader in New York Times way back in the 80s. Then another instance in Virginia that next decade in the 90s.
So he saw a few of these pop up and nobody was doing nothing.
Yeah, so kind of like the BS High episode.
Yeah.
When the guy first caught wind that Roy Johnson was having these practices, and he said something to people, but nobody really paid him.
But as a journalist, you need like a lot of proof.
I guess that's the struggle of being a journalist, when you find stuff like this and you know that it's real and it's happening, but your publisher or whatever is like, nah, where's your proof?
Yeah.
So people within the Scout Network claim not to know when journalists would bring up the allegations of abuse. Everybody would turn a blind eye.
And there's the red flag
and
for
redirect.
me.
A lot of people redirected in the documentary saying, oh, stuff like this happens all the time in a lot of places.
Yeah.
Another red flag right there. Everyone in the organization is aware of this ineligible volunteer file, which is basically a file that the Boy Scouts keep for their records, where they ban or suspend certain scout leaders or leaders for allegations or situations of abuse.
This was definitely, they called it a red flag list themselves.
But that being a red flag, they also made sure nobody saw these files. So they kept it to themselves. So it's not like a thing where your parents or the parents of the kids knew about these people. It was, we're going to keep this inside so that it doesn't, affect us.
Yeah.
And people don't hear about this thing.
And it just, first of all, the fact that you can even have a list just goes to show that there was more than this. This isn't just a few bad apples.
No.
And now that you have a list, like, what are you going to do with that list? Like, they weren't really enforcing it.
So even with the list, like you said, people weren't really enforcing it. An example being Thomas Hacker faced trial and went to jail in 1988 as one of the most prolific Scouts pedophiles. And he was somebody who I'm assuming was on the list, and then he wiggled his way back in. So it's like you could get on this list for doing something inappropriate and I guess earn your stripes again and then be
not even earn your stripes. They just weren't double checking the list. You could just go to another city.
I guess they're saying this guy was on the list and then he had got his way back to being...
Oh, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like you can work your way back even after, getting put on that list, which is terrible to me. Like, that's like something once you get on it, you should just go to jail afterwards.
And that's the thing, like... Not to bring up, but let's say a black man gets on the sex offender list. You're not going to have an easy time finding housing, finding a job, yet these... mostly white male scout leaders were able to just hop from town to town, troop to troop.
Look, I ain't see no brothers leading those.
Didn't see any black people in this documentary.
Look, we gonna tell y'all about the only brother we see in this documentary. He deserves a cape. So this guy Thomas Hacker I just talked about that was on the list and worked his way back on. He actually abused hundreds of boys in the group settings, and it will even be multiple at the same time.
That
sometimes,
was disgusting.
Which was very hard to listen to some of his victims talk. And basically he commented once he was arrested, and I guess he was getting interrogated, and he said that he did the things that he did because they made it easy to do. he knew he was a monster, and being a scout leader for the Boy Scouts of America settled his thirst. So to me, that was very. When I heard him say that quote, I actually got chills watching the documentary. So all of this is possible because scout leaders have low to no supervision at all when it comes to who is, actually telling them how to deal with the kids, who's training them on child safety, whatever. They basically are being sent out and being responsible for young men, and nobody's checking for them or keeping them in line.
And we don't have kids ourselves, but I feel like if we did, we would be very cautious. So you have to be careful who watch your kids, because honestly, they was just taking these kids out in the middle of the woods camping. We thought they was camping.
As a kid, I had parents who were very, at the time, seemed as though they were controlling. But during this time period in America, I feel like my parents, it wasn't just you can't go over to that person's house because I don't like how the kid behaves. I see now that it was I don't know how the adult behaves. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of these parents were turning their children over to the Boy Scouts because they were young men who needed something positive and constructive to do, thinking that the adults responsible would act accordingly and, teach their children about whatever they wanted them to teach them about without things like this happening. So it kind of was just
you would never think a Boy Scout leader would be touching the boys. It was sad. It was sad.
It's very sad. So enter Detective Michael Johnson.
Yes, this guy deserves a cape. Like, he really is the only person that I could tell documentary besides the victims.
Honestly, he kind of reminded me of my pops, just like the way he looked. Bald, black dude. Man in the badge. So enter Michael Johnson, who was a detective who worked with children and child abuse his entire career and families. So since 1986, he's been investigating child abuse and was even a Cub Scout himself. And in 2010, Johnson was hired as the Youth Protection Director for Boy Scouts of America. So this is after a lot of allegations have came to light. So this was an effort from the Boy Scouts to try to make it seem like they were doing something about the problem that they were having.
And that's a red flag for me, because you hired the black man as a token. You basically just wanted to put somebody in this role to show people, look, we're doing something about it. Yeah. But you really didn't do nothing about it. So, that's a red flag, that diversity hire. Like, why would you put all that pressure on a black man?
That reminds me of something that he quoted. He said that they market safety, but that's not what I've seen. So even a lot of times he would try to ask about certain things. What is the process of hiring scouts? What are some things we can do to give victims a better chance of coming, to people about things that may have happened? And they would softly shut him down and redirect. So basically, he said that is because he learned that the scouts, they do not have a rigorous application process at all. They claim they were making people apply, making people apply with government IDs, license, passport, whatever, was too expensive and cost them too much energy and manpower.
I am just making a face right now because it really blew my mind that you don't have to get your government ID check to be a Boy Scout leader. Like, you have to get your government ID check just to get on a plane.
I had to get fingerprints to work at some of the jobs that I've had.
Exactly.
Background checks, drug tests. These are things, you know what I'm saying?
Just common that you have to do for any job or volunteer opportunity. Like, simple background checks they didn't want to do because it's too costly or too inconvenient for people. Oh, I'm sorry it's inconvenient for you, criminal, to do a background check. Like, that's a red flag.
Because most people who are innocent of most things have no problem.
Yeah, I don't really have a problem. Take my fingerprints. I have nothing to hide.
I was please. You know what I mean?
Oh my God, I couldn't believe that. So, let's get into some of the survivors. I don't want to call them victims. They were really survivors. They had a whole bunch of folks in this documentary talk about their different experiences in different states, in different eras, different decades. As we said, the Boy Scouts have been around for over 100 years, so there's been a lot of abuse over these years. And one of the first survivors that they showed us was Richard Winman. He was a Boy Scout from 1972 to 1976. He was recruited to America by two guys in the neighborhood because he had a single mom, and these guys essentially gifted him and groomed him. And this is kind of the same old stories here, right? Like, young, vulnerable child, single mom. She's like, yeah, go on and take him fishing. I don't care. Like, get him off my hands. Yeah. And so in doing so, she didn't realize she was handing her son over to pedophiles.
Literally.
He said that, I think this was the guy who said that Oh yeah, he said he was too young to even be a Boy Scout. They have age requirements to be a Boy Scout, and he was not even in the age requirement.
Yeah.
And they weren't even a real troop. They were just two guys in the neighborhood. So now you have people putting on this facade and faking as though they are Boy Scout leaders. And it's the 70s. We don't have the internet. We're not double checking our sources. So we're like, yeah, sure, go ahead and take my son. And so he said that, you know, they weren't really empowering these boys. They were essentially sex rings, to put it frankly, because he said that they were renting them and selling them to other men. And at one point, he even was brought to a hotel. His own mother dropped him off at the hotel because that would have been a red flag to me. I would have been like, wait, your Boy Scout leader wants to meet you at a hotel? And you're 7 years old?
And I know it wasn't no Hilton. It was probably some shady motel.
Yeah.
Or whatever. Or maybe it was a nice spot because the dudes, they had people coming in, other pedophiles. Oh, yeah,
from Europe flying in.
Europe.
Okay, sorry, Europe.
So, look, it's to me, it really makes me grateful to have the community that was checking for stuff like this. Because, and I think I kind of see why Danger in the white van was such a thing with millennials, because he literally said that the fake scout leader told him it was a toy or a game that he really wanted that his mother couldn't afford. So he said, hey, I have this game at my house. So
we come on over here and play.
We have to go to my house. We can own a game at my house, and you can't tell your mom that I have this game. So they were literally using all of the tactics we learned, or all of the things that we learned to avoid as 90s kids. Yeah. And they used the Boy Scouts as a cover because they knew that they could.
Yeah, this was really the craziest cover-up ever. And so it didn't stop there. It obviously continued. I just didn't realize that it was still happening to this day, y'all.
I didn't know people were faking Boy Scouts. Yeah. Like, I didn't know that was a thing. I thought, like, legit Boy Scout leaders were the ones that were doing all of these crimes all these times. I had no idea people were like... There was just
criminals as well, just getting infiltrated into the network.
It's ridiculous.
So there was another survivor, Christopher Haywood. His abuse lasted for 9 years, and he was told that he would never be anybody and he'll never be nothing, and his abuse lasted for 9 years, as I said, and he was told that no one will believe you. That's just how they keep these kids down. If you're an impressionable, grade schooler, you're thinking, oh my God, they're really gonna kill my family. If you told me that now, I'd be like,